This episode is made possible by Skillshare, home to over 20,000 classes that could help you learn a new life skill. Sign up using the link below and get your first 2 months completely free. If you've seen Star Wars or Star Trek or any number of blockbuster sci-fi movies, you know how popular the idea of space warfare is. Giant vessels blasting at each other while smaller ships zip around blowing each other up with lasers and photon torpedoes. What's not to love? It's good fun and we all know it's fiction. That might not be the case for much longer. Though we might not have the technology to build a Death Star just yet, the White House has unveiled their plan to create a new branch of the US military, a so-called Space Force. If we do end up militarizing space, what will that mean for space exploration, or for the future of warfare? Now, before you get all up in arms, we need to clarify a couple things. First, we already kind of have a military group in charge of operations in space, the US Air Force Space Command. Space Command is mostly in charge of keeping the nation's satellites safe, including from foreign aggressors. The United States relies on an extensive array of satellites for all sorts of applications, from GPS to weather to communications. At this point, our entire infrastructure is built on the backs of these essential pieces of equipment. With the announcement of the proposed Space Force, many critics suggested that there was no need for a new branch of the military when we already have the Air Force Space Command. That being said, the transition would be very similar to what we saw with the Air Force in 1947. The Air Force used to be a subsection of the Army. Like the US Army Air Force became its own entity, the Air Force, the US Air Force Space Command will likely become a new independent branch, the Space Force. While critics speculate that there's no need for an entire branch devoted to outer space, others believe it's the next logical step in military development, especially since developed nations are increasingly reliant on satellites, and therefore increasingly vulnerable to foreign attacks. Another thing people get wrong about militarizing space is that they assume the Outer Space Treaty prohibits weaponizing space vessels. This is only partly correct. The treaty, which the US, UK, Russia, and 104 other nations have signed, prohibits the placing of nuclear weapons anywhere in space. It also prohibits building military bases, testing weapons, or conducting military maneuvers on any celestial body. However, the treaty does not prohibit the use of conventional weapons, which are still deadly. In fact, Russia has already sent at least one serious weapon to space. In the dark depths of the Cold War, the Soviet Union secretly built and installed a 14.5mm cannon that could reportedly fire between 950 and 5,000 rounds per minute, and accurately hit targets up to 2 miles away. Of course, the tremendous recoil generated by the cannon would have made it hard to use effectively in space, requiring the use of thrusters to counteract its momentum, and the entire 20-ton space station had to be rotated to line up their shot. The weapon was only tested once, just before deorbiting the space station. Other, more effective conventional weapons would include kinetic bombardment rods, telephone pole-sized cylinders of tungsten which could be aided by a rudimentary guidance system to hit targets on Earth, striking with enough kinetic energy to do massive damage, even without explosives. The problem with this type of weapon is that it would have to be launched from a satellite, which would have to be positioned slowly and precisely into an orbit that would intersect with the intended target, which could take a very long time, much longer than, say, a ground-based ICBM. At this point, we really don't have much in the way of space weaponry that would be more effective than Earth-based tools. But that doesn't mean we won't see space weapons in the near future. These will most likely be basic defenses for satellites, but if countries start pulling out of the Outer Space Treaty, we should be concerned. So, is militarizing space a good thing or a bad thing? Well, we have to look at it rationally. Sure, Space Force might sound silly, and it might be kind of disappointing to think that outer space could become just another battlefield rather than a purely scientific domain, but we have to realize there are some very positive possibilities. First, we know that Russia and North Korea have been incredibly antagonistic towards the Western world. Being able to defend our satellites from foreign adversaries is absolutely necessary to prevent a crippling of Western nations and a collapse of communication and navigation systems. Another important consideration is that any time the military gets involved in research and development for a new challenge, the technology inevitably trickles down to the average consumer. In this instance, with the military pouring huge amounts of money into developing space technology, if NASA isn't going to get a budget raise anytime soon, this is the next best thing. New propulsion technologies, guidance systems, life support, communications. The possibilities are endless and could easily be applied to purely scientific pursuits. The military being involved in space could also inspire huge numbers of young people to pursue a career in aerospace engineering, or astrophysics, or any number of important fields that could fill roles in both the military and the public sector, and perhaps even rekindle enough interest to spark a new space race. If this new Space Force really wants to be useful, they can spend their time tracking non-military threats in addition to foreign interference. Giant asteroids pose a huge threat to our existence, and could easily wipe us off the face of the Earth in one random collision. The military could develop new detection technologies and tools or weapons that could intercept, redirect, or destroy dangerous asteroids before they ever got close to Earth. Even if this proposed new branch of the military comes from a misguided or paranoid place, investing huge sums of money into space technology could be the driver we need to really excel beyond Earth, and usher in a new age of space exploration and scientific understanding. There's so much to learn when it comes to space exploration, and while that may be a bit beyond the reach of most of us, we can learn plenty of other useful skills with Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators, with over 20,000 classes in everything from photography to graphic design to productivity, marketing, fine art, and more. I love Skillshare because anytime I'm bored, I can just put on a class and learn something worthwhile. A premium membership gives you unlimited access to high-quality classes on useful topics, so you can improve your skills, unlock new opportunities, and do the work you love. I'm actually working on my own Intro to Photography course. I'm not going to give you an estimate of when it'll be done because it's taking much longer than I expected, but it'll be available for you to watch at some point in the near future. Join me and the millions of other students already learning on Skillshare today with a special offer just for you guys. Get 2 months of Skillshare completely free. To start learning amazing new skills today, visit Skillshare by following the link below.